Okay, so here it is, the Air65, and BetaFPV has been working on this formula for some time now. Now, they first released their airframe, and that was a huge success. It was only a matter of time till they released their lightweight motor and flight controller setup. And as you can see, they've done it all together here in this unique and clean package right here. Now, on the back here, you have this Air65 brushless whoop, quadcopter. Says Freestyle Express LRS 2.4G. Now, the Air65 comes in two versions, both in a freestyle and a race version. The only difference being a change in the KV and prop combination. Today we have the freestyle version. So let's open this up and see what you get. All right, foam insert. And we have a, looks like a USB-C to pigtail connector. What's in the, and some bolts here. So this is a very lightweight drone, and this is the theme for today. It's a super light drone, and they're proud of it. So a lot of components, including the connector to the flight controller, is very, very small. And you do have this adapter here to connect to your computer for beta flight. Besides that, you have some spare propellers in here. This thing is very, very small. Looks like some HQ 31mm propellers. These are obviously a press fit, and these are very, very lightweight. Besides that, you have the drone right here. Wow, this thing is super light. We'll take a look at that. You also have a spare or replacement canopy or camera holder. Really cool. Now, this is where a lot of the weight savings comes from, and they've spent a lot of time engineering this right here. In fact, this is like a version 2 where it's a little bit softer, it's lighter, and you can have more adjustment for your camera. So pretty cool by BetaFPV to be kind of leaders in this whole lightweight drone department here. Besides that, you have a QR code. You can go to the website, get information on this drone or the manual for this drone altogether. So here it is, the Air65. They've done some, this is spectacular, guys. I've waited so long for this drone. This is interesting. Now, I've been flying the Mobula 6 for a while, guys, and I've seen that drone. I talked about how light it was when I did the initial review of this drone on here, and technology changes so fast, just a few years, and they've done some pretty cool changes on here. We'll talk about it here very shortly. This is more like a custom drone. There's a lot of guys in the tiny whoop scene, and they've taken drones and make it as light, durable, and fly as good as possible. And it's impressive to see a drone of this size coming straight from the factory, guys. That's really impressive. So anyways, let's weigh this thing. All right, let's weigh the Mobula 6 first. I'm curious about that. And that's 20 grams, guys. And at the time, that was pretty impressive. Let's take a look at this one here. 16 grams. I think they say this thing is gonna be a weight of around 15.6 or so grams. So this is significantly lighter than the actual Mobula 6 by 4 to 5 grams. And that's huge in the tiny whoop space. So pretty impressive, guys. Now let's put it with the battery as well. So I'm curious about that. And we're looking at 25 grams, so not too bad. 25 grams altogether. We'll talk more about the battery here. All right, so let's take a closer look at the Air65, and this thing here is pretty impressive. It actually looks pretty good as well. Now, the first thing here I notice is this frame here. That's what makes it so special. You have this lightweight frame. It's very durable. This is where a lot of the weight savings comes from. Now, BetaFPV does provide a few other frames here if you want them in different colors. We have a blue, the same color as the one here. We also have a transparent and also a white. Now, there's numerous colors in this, and this has been a very successful frame for them. Now, they've been making frames for a long time, even from the Meteor 65. And a lot of guys been using those frames to compete with the Mobile 6. This is just a different iteration of it. They kind of perfected it, making it very durable, strong, but yet lightweight, guys. Very impressive by BetaFPV. Now, if you want to make your own Air65, and I'm sure a lot of guys will be doing that. And in fact, we'll talk about that a little bit later. This is probably the frame to go with. This is going to be a very highly popular frame, especially going into the winter and whoop season. Besides that, you have the prop and motor combo on here. Now, these are the 702. This one here is good for around 23,000 kV. And this is the freestyle version. If you're gonna get the race version, you're gonna have a higher kV, around 27,000 kV. And we'll see how that does with the battery life. Typically with these smaller drones, you get around 3 minutes of flight time. We'll see how long that actually lasts here, but pretty nice and impressive here. Now, this propeller here, it looks really light and small. These things are probably made specifically for this drone, but you can see it looks pretty good. It is transparent. It is impressive. Press on. 1 millimeter is pretty standard for this kind of segment. And guys, I am totally intrigued by this. I don't like making these smaller drones because it's so tedious to make, but it's cool because a lot of the guys who make custom drones find such intriguing ways to save on weight. And as I said before, it's pretty cool that a manufacturer would make a drone and make it reliable, but yet still durable and lightweight. So they're taking a lot of the cues from the industry, from pilots, and putting it into this small drone. Very impressive, guys. Now, talking about that, you can see the motors here. Typically of other drones, the Meteor 75 or even the Mobile 6, you have these motors that are plugged into the flight control and ESC. In this case, to even save on weight, these things are soldered onto the board here to save a few grams. And every gram here does count with this drone. So that's a little bit different here. So if you do damage or fry a motor, you will have to solder it onto the board. Now that leads us to the flight controller and ESC on this board. Now this is actually a 4-in-1 board. That means it has the flight controller, ESC, actually a OSD chip, as well as the VTX on here. So it's pretty impressive for a 4-in-1. Now this one here is a little bit different. This one is the G series processor, G473, and this has a 5M ESC, which is pretty much standard for the course. Even from the years past, most of these drones have like a 5M ESC, but this thing here is so small that this should be more than adequate for this drone. Now we'll see how this thing here performs. How's the tune on here? I'm pretty eager to fly this thing. I can see that the VTX or the camera is not soldered onto the board. They're using the plug, which is pretty cool for sure. And I can see the antenna, the UFL connector for the actual VTX. Now, talking about the UFL and the VTX antenna, usually VTX of the past had an output around 200 milliwatts. That was pretty much the standard, and it did pretty well. You would fly this indoors, sometimes outdoors, but technology has evolved and caught up, and now we have this thing here sporting around 400 milliwatts, which is pretty impressive. That's going to give you better penetration through walls, or if you're going to fly this here pretty far, because this does have express LRS on it, so you can fly this drone pretty far. I think the limiting factor of this drone is going to be just the battery and the flight time, not really the VTX or the receiver on this drone. So I can't get over it, guys. Now, talking about VTX and UFL connector, let's talk about the visuals on the drone. Now, they're using a CO3 camera on here. It's their lightweight camera by BetaFPV. They've used this camera and set up before multiple times on other drones, and it has been really successful. It's not the best camera on the market, but it does really good, especially indoors. Now, this thing here is very lightweight. You can see it's actually angled here a little bit. And let's talk about the canopy as well. We talked about this lightweight redesigned canopy on here. Some of the other drones in the market uses a full-size canopy, including BetaFPV with their Meteor series. They've adopted something seen on the aftermarket world, and it's pretty cool. Very lightweight. As you can see, it's a very transparent kind of canopy. It holds the camera very straight and securely, and you have a little screw here to keep the camera in the right orientation and secure. Now, the cool thing about this very minimal design, and you have a couple of holes on here so you can adjust the tilt on the camera here. I think it's between 20 and maybe 40 degrees. It can be pretty aggressive. This is on the mildest setting as right now, and that should be adequate for this drone right here. It's, as I said, guys, it's pretty impressive. It's held down by like 4 screws, and you can easily adjust it by altering the one in the back. Now, right behind the camera here is the Express LRS receiver. Now, we've used this receiver multiple times in the past. It is Express LRS, so it should give you good range and penetration. Now, I can see that it's a serial receiver, so that means you can update the receiver on this independent of the firmware on the flight control, which is really good. Most drones are going to that. Some of the older technology drones has like a SPI receiver. This one here actually is an FR Sky, but some of the other ones has it built into the board, and you have to update the firmware actually on the flight control to update the firmware on the receiver. But this is pretty cool. This is the better way of doing it. Now, this receiver here is very small and light, but I'm sure there's other ways to make this even lighter, probably by having the Express LRS integrated into the board. And I'm sure they'll be doing that probably in a future version of this drone. Now, underneath here, you have the flight controller. The big thing here is the battery tray. Now, BetaFPV recommends a 260 to a 300 milliamp hour battery, and that's what we use today. This is a Lava battery by BetaFPV. This thing isn't too heavy. Let's see how much it weighs. In the past, these batteries have performed very, very well. This one weighs around 8 grams, so not too bad. And they've delivered pretty good performance. Probably one of the best batteries in the industry, guys. Now, besides the BetaFPV has done some slight changes in here. This obviously is their proprietary BT 2.0 connector, which is really good. A lot of guys have actually switched over their other drones to this connector because it's so superior. But BetaFPV has done some alterations and made some improvements on their connector here. They've gone with their new U connector on here. It's lightweight, and it makes it easier to connect your battery, and it also reduces the amount of wires required to connect it, because usually with the old style, you have to have a longer wire, curve it around, and it's pretty much a hassle. In this case, the orientation is gonna be very similar, very straightforward. You just unplug it. So really cool design. A lot of guys will be going to this connector in the future since it makes so much sense for a drone of this size. Last but not least, we have a plug on the here, and that interfaces with Betaflight on your computer. We talked about this harness right here. This is going to convert it from this specific port to a USB-C port so you can connect to your computer right here. So overall, this drone here looks, guys, it looks amazing. It's so light. Hopefully it's durable enough. But this thing is so light that there's no momentum in case you crash this. Be very low inertia, so these crashes should be very minimal. Let's hope so. This looks so good, guys. I'm really psyched to go take this for a flight. So I'm gonna put my binding phrase on the receiver, and let's go for a flight. Okay, so back from our test flight, and I'm not even gonna waste your time. The Air65 did an amazing job, plain and simple. It's very rare that I come up from a test flight or a review and I'm kind of lost for words. That's how well this thing here performed. Now, my job here as a reviewer is to give you my flight experience, give an objective review, and leave all my opinions and subjectivity out of it. But today might be a little bit different. Now, as usual, we'll start off by talking about the flight characteristics. Now, the Air65 did an amazing job, and honestly, I think this is the best part or the best trait of the Air65 is how well it flies. Now, I armed this thing, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. So if you want to fly your drone in an inconspicuous area or place, or maybe you have your family sleeping during whoop season, I do think you can pull this off and fly this indoors while everyone's taking a nap. It's that quiet. Now, it does have the traditional tiny whoop sound, but it really isn't loud, guys. Now, I started to fly this drone in angle mode, obviously indoors, and this thing did a really good job. This thing flew straight like an arrow. It didn't freak out. Obviously, we have no winds indoors, but I was kind of surprised how well it reacted, only because these things require precise throttle management. If you're not good on the throttles or the sticks, this thing will show it in the video. But it did take a while to get used to, but it was not too wild, not too aggressive. It worked really well, guys. Now, afterwards, I did go outside. I did put this thing in acro mode, air mode, and this thing felt alive. It just came alive. This thing was so much more responsive. And honestly, guys, it still tracked straight. Now, the conditions today weren't the best. I was fine with winds between 10 and 15 miles an hour. And I can't lie, this thing did a really good job, but it wasn't affected by the external environments. Meaning that, yes, the wind might make the drone drift left or right, but it wouldn't twitch or move or freak out. The flight control reacted very well to the winds outside. It's kind of telepathic. It felt like an extension of my body. So say for example, I want to go for a gap, my brain would say, okay, move your fingers to the left, and the drone would go immediately and it will not deviate from that track. It was, as they say, like on rails. Usually you hear people talk about cars or like bikes handling like it's on rails. That's a really good description of how this thing flies. Once you set it, it just stays there pretty darn good. Now later on, as I got comfortable with the drone, I did do some light or basic acro maneuvers, and that's where I thought the limitation of this drone was gonna be met. But honestly, this thing worked surprisingly well, guys, surprisingly well. Basic loops and rolls, this thing didn't freak out, no washout. It was amazing, guys. And I started to do some dives, and I kept going higher and higher and higher, doing some more dives, and there was no washout. This thing would go straight down, guys. You can see it in the video. And we're talking about winds at 15 miles an hour, a 25-gram drone, and you put it in one location, it would just keep going in the same track. I was blown away. This thing flew almost, well, this thing dove almost like a 3.5-inch freestyle drone. It was that good, guys. So if you're some kind of a guerrilla whoop pilot, this might be the perfect drone, not that I condone it, to do some building dives. This would be perfect. It's quiet, it can do it, and it's not gonna move off track. So kudos to BetaFPV on the tune on this drone and the flight controller. It just works, guys. It was the highlight of this whole experience, was just how well it flew, guys. So kudos to them again for putting a good tune on this, and just the whole combination just makes this drone fly pretty well. All right, let's move on to visuals on the Air65. Now we have the CO3 camera on here, and we've known or know what to expect from this camera from the past, and it did deliver the same performance. Now flying indoors, it was pretty much perfect. It was good. Everything was exposed very well. Everything was pretty good, really good dynamic range. The colors are very neutral, no real high saturation, and that's what you want from a really good camera. Now flying this outdoors, it was pretty good as well, but you have the complexity of bright sun and some shadows. Now I noticed that sometimes as I was flying, the sky would just change some colors. It wasn't a really accurate color or representation of the sky. And I think that had to do with just it trying to focus or expose for both the actual clouds or the sun and the ground. Or it could just be my VRX in my headset, I don't know. My headset have never done that before, but it could also be that. As far as the transmission system on here, the VTX, it didn't skip a beat, guys. It was pretty good. I flew this entirely on 200 milliwatts. Obviously indoors, it wasn't a problem. I went downstairs outside and it worked fine, guys. Now I did fly this drone in some areas where I know there was known interference, where I fly my bigger drones with bigger or higher output. And it did okay. There was some interference, but still we flew it at 200 milliwatts and there really wasn't any issues, guys. Now this thing can go up to 400 milliwatts, but I never had any problems or issues to even go or test it at 400 milliwatts. Now I'm sure you get better range and penetration with that higher power output, but it might be at the sacrifice at battery life and therefore shorter flight time. So just be aware of that. Now talking about higher VTX output and battery life, let's talk about the flight time on the Air65. Now I flew this drone on the 1S 300 milliamp hour lava batteries. These things historically have performed very well, and this is no exception. These things are amazing, guys. It is pretty cool. Now I average indoors around 4 minutes of flight time, and that's mixed flying, doing some gaps, doing some punch outs, but pretty steady flying. There's no wind obviously indoors, so that's acceptable. Now going outdoors, I did average between 3.5 to 4 minutes of flight time, so a little bit less due to the winds, open space, more throttle, and that makes sense, guys. But more impressive than the flight time is the lack of sag on these batteries. Multiple times I'm doing some acro maneuvers, I'm doing some dives, I want to recover and do a punch out, and never once did I have any sagging or voltage sag on this, nor did I see any kind of like low voltage warnings on my screen. So these batteries are pretty amazing. Now the disclaimer here is that your performance may vary depending on the battery that you use, the size, and how old they are. Now these are brand spanking new batteries specifically bought for this drone here, and these lava batteries perform well anyhow, so these are probably the best you're gonna get. So if you intend to do any kind of like aggressive flying, whether it be with the Air65 or any drone, I would highly recommend you pick up some of these lava batteries. They do perform very well. Okay, so let's move on to the RX Link. Now this one has an Express LRS receiver in here. You can see it on the back behind the camera. And it did a pretty good job, especially indoors. Now I did fly my radar here, my Radar Master Pocket at 100 milliwatts. And that's usually more than adequate for any drone. Now, I flew this thing indoors and outdoors. Indoors, it did pretty fine. Flying downstairs and outside, I did see the RSSI DBM go as low as -100 to -103, 104. So that was kind of concerning, but never once did I have a failsafe while doing that whole procedure or maneuver. So pretty good. Now going outside, obviously you have obstacles, you have line of sight issues. I did increase the power output to 250. Normally I don't do that, but just because I saw the lower numbers flying downstairs, I said, okay, well, I'm going behind buildings in areas where there's known interference. I want to increase the power output on my radio. So I did see some low numbers when I got really, really far, or areas of known interference between, I want to say -101 to around 110, 111. So really low. At some point, I did also get like a telemetry warning, but that's not anything to be worried about. That's not indicative of a low or failsafe, eminent failsafe. It just means that the telemetry coming from your receiver to the radio is a little bit lower. And usually the power output on the telemetry is a little bit lower than the actual transmitter and the information on the receiver here. So overall, Express LRS still is the way to go. It is light, it is responsive, it is very efficient. So pretty good deal by BetaFPV, including a Express LRS receiver on this. Finally, let's talk about drone design and durability. Now, the drone design and aesthetics of this drone is, I don't know, it's simply amazing, guys. This looks really, really nice. I like to compare this to a custom-built drone, guys. It's like having a custom drone built by a factory, by a manufacturer. But they chose some really cool materials, some good materials actually. The color scheme is pretty nice, obviously. We have no broken ducts in here. It's very, very light and durable. And if you do break one or you want to build one for yourself, you have all these spares right here that you can buy from their website. So pretty cool. I do think that this is going to be popular in the future. But just small stuff like this canopy here, this redesigned canopy compared to the Meteor 65 series, they've taken a lot of steps from custom drone builders and integrated into this overall package. Even this nice little U connector on here, everything seems pretty interesting, guys. I do think that there are ways to make this drone even lighter. Stuff like using some plastic screws in here would make this very, very light, or a little bit lighter, maybe a gram or two. And then just changing this receiver to maybe one that's on the actual board. You can save probably a gram or two with that, and that's going to increase the efficiency and the thrust to weight ratio of this drone right here. But overall, I have to give them an A+ for this design. As I said before, it just feels like a custom drone that comes from a manufacturer. So you get all the custom features with nice soldering and a nice design, guys. So overall, pretty cool. So overall, what do I think about the Air65? Well, I normally don't say this, but I do think that this is kind of like a must buy, guys. As I said before, my job as a reviewer is not to persuade, but just to inform you. But I do think that this is kind of the exception. Now, if you're a drone pilot or a FPV enthusiast, then this drone has some aspect that you will appreciate. Anything from the lightweight design and engineering to the tune on here, or just the fun ability of flying a tiny loop. This thing is just so cute and tiny, and it's so powerful, guys. It's just really good. It has a really good composure. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel like you want to have, like, honestly, the problem I had with this drone was that I wish I had more batteries. The problem I have with this drone right now as I'm filming and reviewing this review is that I want to fly this even more. That's how it makes me feel. Now, in the automotive world, we have a saying or phrase that says miles per gallon. And all that means is that you don't need a big, fancy, expensive car with high horsepower to have fun. You can still have as much or more fun with a small, tiny, underpowered car and have the same or even more fun. And I do think that the Air65 has those same qualities. It may not be miles per gallon, it might be miles per cell, and this one cell drone does put a lot of smile on my face, guys. Now, if you want to pick up one of these Air65 for yourself, I'll leave links down below, as well as for the Power 20 Pro as well. It does help the channel and there's no cost to you. So let me know what you think about this Air65 down below. Is this pretty impressive? Are you gonna pick one up for yourself? And if you have any questions about this drone, you can leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer those. So thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video. Peace.